2 years ago, my mother's attack on my ex-wife led to our divorce. I never stopped loving her, and now I may have a second chance to make things right. 2 years ago, I, a 28-year-old man, went through a painful divorce from my wife, who was 24 at the time. We had been together for a year before marriage and had been married for 3 years. She was the love of my life, and the divorce remains my greatest regret. The reason for our split, unfortunately, came down to my mother, my nightmare of a mother-in-law. My mother's interference in our marriage was constant, and I foolishly allowed it to happen. She criticized my ex-wife at every opportunity, and I did nothing to stop it. I should have enforced strict boundaries early on when I noticed the damage she was causing. I was 20 when my ex-wife got pregnant with our first child, and I was preparing to go to college a few hours away. While she was 6 months pregnant, I made the tough decision to tell her that I wasn't ready for a relationship, but I would still support her in everything that had to do with our baby, except for one thing. I wouldn't give up on going to college. This caused a huge rift. She left me, and I tried to make contact, but soon after, she filed a restraining order against me. It was based on a false accusation that I had threatened to harm her if she had my child around another man. The restraining order was a bitter blow, but I fought it and got it lifted. Still, the custody of our child was granted entirely to her, and this meant that I couldn't even visit my daughter without risking being arrested. After the divorce, I distanced myself from my mother, going no contact with her twice during my ex-wife's miscarriages. I wanted to shield my wife from added stress, but my mother's obsession with controlling our relationship became unbearable. She would show up at our house uninvited and harass my wife. During the second miscarriage, I made the mistake of allowing my mother into our home, hoping to calm her down. However, instead of staying calm, she went upstairs, woke my wife, and screamed at her for ruining my relationship with her. She even made cruel comments about my wife's fertility. I kicked my mother out immediately, but the damage was done. My ex-wife was devastated, and that was the breaking point in our marriage. A month later, we agreed to divorce. Afterward, my ex-wife moved to the UK to stay with her father, and I did everything I could to move on. I went no contact with my mother and started therapy. I learned how toxic my relationship with her was and began setting boundaries. Now we have low contact. We only speak during family events, but according to my siblings, my mother still doesn't acknowledge her wrongdoings. Despite everything, I never moved on from my ex-wife. In fact, I became more in love with her as time went on. We had occasional communication, especially around birthdays and special events. It started with a text from her on our wedding anniversary, "Happy un-anniversary, loser," which lightheartedly opened the door for us to reconnect. From then on, we texted regularly, and she told me about the 2 men she had dated in the UK. I told her about the therapy I had undergone, and she jokingly asked if I had cut the umbilical cord with my mother yet. When my ex-wife told me that none of the men she had dated could handle her the way I could, I began to realize how much I missed her. I still had her engagement ring and our wedding bands, which made me realize how much I regretted what had happened. Over time, we began communicating more consistently and like old friends. The time came when she told me that she would be moving back to the US in October, and my brother started organizing a homecoming party for her. He asked if I would consider meeting up with her one-on-one when she returned. I wasn't sure if I should ask her, but it consumed my thoughts. I decided to ask my sister for advice, and she told me to wait for her to take the lead. I started thinking about the possibility that my ex-wife still had feelings for me. Her flirtatious humor made me wonder, especially when she said that no one could handle her like I could. So, after much deliberation, I decided to ask her out. I called her, and she immediately said yes. In fact, she told me that if I hadn't asked her by the week before her return, she would have asked me out herself. She thanked me for making the first move, especially since I had ruined our marriage. I was over the moon, and we decided to take things slow this time around. We even talked about the possibility of moving to the UK if we ever decided to get married again. It was a huge step for both of us, and I felt like we were truly starting fresh. We also discussed counseling to help us work through our past issues. Despite this progress, my mother's behavior continued to be a source of tension. I had made it clear that I no longer wanted anything to do with her. I had gone low contact to protect my ex-wife, but as things progressed with us, I realized that I would need to fully cut ties. My therapist suggested I communicate my boundaries with her more effectively, and I decided to send my mother a letter through a lawyer. My mother's reaction was predictable. She was furious, and my siblings sided with her, accusing me of hurting her. I stood firm and explained that I wanted to protect my relationship with my ex-wife and that I was not willing to let my mother's toxic behavior interfere anymore. My ex-wife and I have been in regular communication, and it's been a beautiful journey of rediscovery. We're taking things slow, which is what we both need. We haven't set a specific timeline for marriage yet, but we are committed to rebuilding our relationship. I'm also planning to sell the house to remove my mother from my life entirely. entirely. I'm finally at peace, knowing that I'm doing the right thing for my future with the woman I've always loved. We're building something new, and I'm filled with hope for what comes next. Thank you to everyone who encouraged me to make that call. It's been life-changing.